Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 78 of Third and Wrong. It is finally here, week one of the NFL. We are fired up. Zach is, and he's not here. No, I'm kidding. He's got some work-related things to take care of. So it's just me and Ozzy holding down the fort. Ozzy, how are things?
Not great, Steve. I hate to end on or start on this note, but I mean the Celtics just lost in double overtime. So yeah, hate to see it, as we say a lot on this podcast. And yeah, I'm not a happy camper, but at the same time, football season's back, so injected in my veins, baby.
In that case, we love to see it.
Exactly. A little bit of bipolarness to start the pod.
No better way. So let's start with this. We're going to get to a regular season preview, but first we want to quickly touch on Leonard Fournette signing with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And Ozzy, maybe you have a little more knowledge around this that, we saw it with LeGarrette Blount in New England, Tom, with his power back. Is that something he likes to rely on? Or, I know you got New England had those receiving backs as well, but what do you think Fournette brings to the Buccaneers and more so Brady in general?
Well, I think anytime you can get a starting running back or starting caliber running back and add him to a backfield that already has, and let's be honest, an aging Shady McCoy, like decent, but not, he's not himself, but it's still Shady McCoy. So you give him a little bit of slack there. So you've got a backfield with him, Ronald Jones, who every offseason has just gotten better in that system. So you add Fournette to those two guys. They might even have others that I am forgetting right now, but that's already a pretty nice backfield if you're going running back by committee. And so anytime you can have that level of backfield, that takes pressure off your quarterback, right? And we might talk about it a little bit, but that's a big reason why I'm so high on the Colts too, is you take a lot of pressure off a quarterback, especially an aging guy. Everybody wants to say Tom Brady's washed up and he's got a noodle arm. Well, how do you kind of fix that or hide that noodle arm? You run the ball a lot. And Fournette, I like to bug Zach a lot too, and kind of an envy that Fournette always had one big run per game, but other than that, it was like 1.7 yards per carry. And so he always ended up, I'm envious because Zach had him on his fantasy team and always benefited from that long ass run at the end of each game. But Fournette shows that he can make those plays from time and again. So if you've got a running back by committee type offense and you don't need to rely on Fournette, I think he's a great guy to have in your locker room. I don't think that he's washed by any stretch. It's fun to poke at the Jags because they took him fourth overall in front of that was the year that Mahomes and Watson were drafted, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, like everybody likes to poke fun at that, but he's still a good back and he's still a strong guy. So I think that this is a great addition for the Bucs just because it's another talented body in that locker room. And he sounds like he's like appreciative of the opportunity. He said he finally get a good quarterback. So maybe that means that he cuts out his sideline shenanigans, hopefully. And if he does, that's what you want on a championship winning roster, right?
I agree. Yeah, I don't have much to add, Ozzy. I think the talent's there, and I think if he's able to solidify himself as the RB1 there, I'm a little choked because I took Ronald Jones in a dynasty league, so that sucks. I'm hurting at the running back position. So, but all bias aside, I think it's a good signing, and like we saw in New England, Tom likes that mixed bags of running backs. You had James White, Sony Michel. Maybe not in the same year with Blount, but I mean, you had Blount a few years before that. That was the Seattle Super Bowl that they won with them. But you still had James
Shane
White,
Vereen and
Rex Burkhead and
Ridley and stuff when we had Blount as well. So
exactly.
There's those other pass catching backs, and then you got the power back.
Yeah.
But to cut you off, Steve, Fournette's not just a passing or just a big downhill runner either. I think he had like 70 catches or something. So he's pretty competent in that front too. It's
right.
I think everybody just thinks of his efficiency, and his efficiency wasn't good in that offense. So that's one thing that I would say about that is that take with it what you will. I think that there's a chance that he's even better than what we've seen, and he's shown that he's a 1,000-yard rusher. But at the same time, he did have efficiency problems. So I don't know. There's two sides to it, and we'll see how he excels in Bruce Arians' scheme without OTAs, without a preseason. Like, he's got a lot to catch up on, but we'll see how big of a role he takes on as the year progresses.
Oh, that makes sense. And you mentioned, I guess we could quickly segue Deshaun Watson. I didn't even have it in the notes, but I just realized he signed a big extension. He's going to be getting paid upwards of $40 million a year. So that puts him at number 2, I believe, behind Patty Mahomes, and that puts him in front of Russell Wilson, who'll be making $35 million a year. I don't really have any takes or anything other than just to report the news on this. It's a smart move by the Houston Texans, who have not been making smart moves over the last 2 years. You know, the Clowney trade. Maybe in retrospect, Seattle hasn't really benefited from now that he's signed with the Tennessee Titans, and the Hopkins trade, which had everyone scratching their heads for David Johnson, an aging running back in that regard. But I mean, you lock down your franchise quarterback, you're doing something right. So at least they have that going for them. And, maybe Bill O'Brien, if in the future, he still proves himself to be a competent coach, maybe he hands over the GM reins to someone else and they can start rebuilding that team around him. He's still only in his mid-20s, so plenty of runway left ahead of him. But any thoughts on this one, Ozzy, or is it pretty speak for itself?
I mean, it speaks for itself, but that's not going to stop me from giving my thoughts on this one. I absolutely love Deshaun Watson. He's probably my favorite quarterback behind Cam Newton right now. Cam Newton, just because he's on the Patriots. But I just love everything about Deshaun Watson. He's done so much with so little surrounding him, including in the front office, with Bill O'Brien being just adamant on trading away any and all talent that is surrounding Deshaun Watson and that team in general. And there's been some questionable moves, but at the same time, at least they didn't make the mistake of letting Deshaun Watson go. I've heard lots of talk last year that Deshaun Watson could and should be disgruntled with the front office in Houston and maybe get a trade out of there. So the fact that he signed a 4-year, $160 million contract, I mean, that's a good way to kind of smooth things over for now. And hopefully Bill O'Brien can start to piece together a decent team and surround him with some good bodies. I mean, he's tried, I guess, with like Brandon Cooks and Randall Cobb, but we've talked on many podcasts this offseason about those guys and their risks that they carry. So at the end of the day, Deshaun Watson has been the franchise in Houston, and he has won games on his back many times, and he's shown that he can be like a top 2 quarterback in this league at times. So I love the deal. And I was going to try to talk about steal from Colin a little bit, how I wanted to add that for our listeners. If you guys follow Colin on Twitter, we've mentioned him a lot, the Herd podcast. He had compared Deshaun Watson and Dak Prescott together side by side and just showed how Deshaun Watson has he's won more games. I think it's 9 more games than Dak Prescott in the last 2 years. And Deshaun Watson has had such a worse roster surrounding him, whereas Dak has had so much more. And so to kind of combine our arguments, I know this is really going down the deep end of the tangent, but I wanted to add this. We talk about Dak's extension. And so, Steve, I'll throw it to you.
Oh, boy.
Now we've got a couple $40 million quarterbacks. We've got 35 for Russ. Where the hell does Dak fall on this line? And like I just said, Deshaun Watson's had a shit roster, gets $40 million. He's won more games, so he's proved that he's worth the $40 million.
Oh,
Dak,
for sure.
A top roster, top down for the last 4 or 5 years, has won less games in the same period as Deshaun Watson. What say you on this?
Okay, so based on the eye test, I feel like the NFC is a tougher conference, so maybe going win for win isn't maybe as fair to Dak. But at the same time, I will not cut any corners on this. Dak has absolutely blown big games and not shown up for big games. I mean, there's no reason why they shouldn't have won that division last year. The Eagles were 5-7 at one point, and the Cowboys, I believe, were 7-5 or maybe even 8-4. How they didn't win that division is beyond me. They got rid of Jason Garrett. They have a much better. I said, I think last week, and I've said it in plenty of group chats, that they have a top 5 roster on paper. You have Mike McCarthy there now, who has experience with Aaron Rodgers. This is the year it's got to come together. It's a Dak contract year. I've seen Daniel Jeremiah and a few others have him as, odds-on favorite to win MVP. If he ends up in the MVP conversation, and God forbid that happens, because I feel like this is Russell's window. Like, Lamar's already won it. Pat Mahomes has already won it. Not that they can't win it again, but maybe like it seems like a sweet spot for Russ to come in, and he's got the weapons. We'll get to that later. But if Dak comes in and at least even steals a vote or two or something like that, I think he ends up getting around the 38 to 40 million range. And the only problem is it's so hard to gauge just because there's so many conflicting reports. It's like, well, he wanted his contract completely guaranteed. And then he came out and said, well, no, that's not true. Then it came out and said he wants, someone said he wanted
instead of 4.
5 years instead of 4, all these different things going on. But if I'm ignoring all that, because I don't know if we can really even confirm any of that, or if anyone can, I believe his true value, based on what the current QB market is probably anywhere between 35 and 38 million. I'm not saying he deserves Russell Wilson money, but at this rate, Russell Wilson's already got paid what he got paid. That was last year. The market resets like every 6 months, it seems. So with the way that's progressing and trending, I think at this rate, you have to assume that he's going to get 35 to 38. Now that Watson's got 40, if he puts his name in the MVP conversation, you can probably expect he's going to maybe even reset the QB market next year, which is tough to say. I'm not saying I agree with it, but just based on kind of the current market trends, I sound like a stock guy saying that. Just based on the current market trends, I feel like he's destined to get a 40 plus million per year deal. Now, a couple things can come into play. They can tag him again. I believe you can use that franchise tag twice before eventually, like they had, like the Washington Football Club did with Kirk Cousins until they had to eventually trade him, or he just signed as a free agent. So I think he was just a free agent. So it's really tough, man. Like I don't love Dak, but I don't hate him. Like I think he's a fringe top 10 quarterback, top 15 for sure. But again, like a guy you're about to pay 40 plus million potentially to, you want to be top 5. This is the year it has to all come together. There's really no excuse now. I understand there's no preseason. He's kind of learning a new system, but he's also retained the same offensive coordinator, added CeeDee Lamb to the mix.
Yeah.
I mean, they made Amari Cooper happy. So, it really seems like everything's there for him.
Yeah, those are good points. I still struggle with the fact that we could be talking about Dak as a $38 million quarterback, and it just baffles my mind. However, I'm really happy with the way, I will say this about the Cowboys. I'm so happy that Jerry Jones and them are waiting it out. It seems like a lot of these front offices just jump the gun and they're like, you know what? We just got to lock up our guy. Well, is Dak the guy? Like he lost you guys the division by losing a couple of games last year, just disappearing at times. Is he your guy? Like,
that's the thing. We saw the Rams do it with Jared Goff. They're like, well, I mean, he got us here, and it's like, all right, well, here's this money, and it's like, well, you probably could have ran that same offense with someone much cheaper than that. Like, I just imagine like a Teddy Bridgewater or someone in that offense, or like maybe not Winston, because you need to be a little more accurate and calculated with the throws, which Jared Goff, to his credit, is. But I feel like there's different routes they could have went than having all that money tied up in Goff. But yeah, I agree. Maybe sometimes it is beneficial to wait it out unless you have a Watson, a Wilson, a Mahomes, or Lamar Jackson. I have no idea what he's going to get. $45 million a year when his contract comes up, his rookie deal. So
yeah,
they're going to have to start discussing those things as well in Baltimore.
But with that being said, Dak can't re-sign or extend until next year now. So we might as well move on with the show. Sorry for going down that rabbit hole, but
no, it's okay.
Now we're going to start digging ourselves out.
There we go. One more thing we didn't have in our notes too. Ja'Deveon Clowney signs with the Titans. I think it's 1 year, $15 million. We railed on this for all offseason, so I didn't want to spend too much time on it. But I think from a Seahawks perspective, they absolutely bungled this. Giving up Jacob Martin, I forget even who else they gave up. It's just the picks that kind of hurt. And I just don't want to see the same thing happen with Jamal Adams. They didn't extend him again right after trading for him. And we traded 2 first-round picks and Bradley McDougald for him. So there's a lot more at stake here than even the Clowney trade. But I just don't know if the Seahawks, it sounded like they offered him $15 million at the start of the offseason, but he wasn't ready to make a decision then. And when he came back to the negotiating table, the Seahawks $15 million was off the table because we had already signed others. So I understand where they're coming from the Seahawks perspective, but I think maybe it wasn't bungled in 2020, but it was bungled when they made the trade and didn't extend him right away. I think that was the issue, but I think this automatically upgrades the Titans. Everyone's going to look at the 3 sacks he had last year and be like, oh, only 3 sacks, but I don't think you have to look deeper into that. You have to look at his pressure rate and things like that. And then he's going to be going back into a 3-4 system. So I don't know if they're going to put him at defensive end as a down lineman there, replacing Jarrell Casey. And then you have Vic Beasley coming off at outside linebacker. So watch out for that defense. So I'm glad I have the Titans where I do in my predictions, because I think they're going to be a good team this year.
Yeah, that addition is massive for that team, which the rich kind of get richer in that sense, because I always like what the Titans are, what they've been doing the last couple of drafts, even just getting guys like, of course, Justin Simmons. No.
That's
just
Denver.
Who was the guy that, I don't know what his name was now. His defensive tackle last year is pretty much a redshirt year for him. And he came back at the end of the year last year. Anyways, point being, they've done really well with their drafts. I'm terrible with names. This is like 3 episodes in a row I've forgotten names on the pod. But anyways, so they've got Malcolm Butler in the secondary. You've got Kevin Byard in the secondary. And you've added Vic Beasley and Ja'Deveon Clowney. And yeah, you're right, Steve. The 3 sacks is kind of misleading, because you watch games, Seahawks games, or even old Texans games, Ja'Deveon Clowney blows up plays single-handedly. It is insane. If you ever heard the expression, a man playing with his hair on fire, it literally looks like Ja'Deveon Clowney plays with his hair on fire probably about 90% of the snaps that he plays. Like, it is insane. Mm-hmm. He's just getting it is about as close to it as you can imagine. So I really like it, and 12 million with and then 3 million with incentives. That's a really, really good deal for edge rushers nowadays, and it's a guy who can play outside linebacker in that Titans system, which you had mentioned Vic Beasley's playing as well. So you could have 2 really good guys out there. Vic Beasley's fallen off a little bit, but he's shown flashes. He's still only 26 or 27, so there's some serious potential on that defense, and I would not want to be Deshaun Watson in that division.
Some Seahawks fan put a knife in my heart, and they put a picture on Twitter, and it was like the last play Clowney played as a Seahawk, he was dropped back into coverage. He wasn't rushing the passer. So maybe he'll be better utilized in Tennessee, and
that's what he does. That's why he was drafted so high too, at first overall. He could do that stuff. He could drop back into coverage. He's a big guy who can play fast as well that way too. So I don't think that you should feel so heartbroken, Steve, because that is a strength of Ja'Deveon Clowney's, and that's why he's so coveted, highly coveted.
Absolutely. Ozzy, some Patriots news. Mohamed Sanu released by New England. Obviously, this one was kind of scrutinized because of the amount of capital he gave up, a 2nd-round pick for him to Atlanta last year. From myself included, Bill's come under some fire for some of his GM moves over the past couple of years. But let's focus on this one specifically. What grade would you give this trade now, considering where we are, 10 months later after the trade was made?
Sorry, what was the question?
What grade would you give this trade, knowing what we know now, 10 months later?
Well, obviously an F, Steve.
There we go. Fair enough. I just wanted to hear you say it, man. I just want to know if that delusion would come through or not.
That's a loaded question and a half.
Yeah.
All right, fair enough. Now that I see what you're going for, Jesus. Did you want me to give any more takes on that?
Yeah. What's your receiving room look like now? You still got Jules, and you got N'Keal Harry. Who else is there?
Yeah, that's a good question. Gunnar Olszewski, who was an undrafted free agent last year. He was kind of like a preseason darling, where he was winning over the hearts of Pats fans, myself included. And he's kind of reminds you of Julian Edelman when he was kind of starting out. So it's just kind of nice to see that.
I could have known that just from his name being Gunnar. Yeah, I felt like he'd be a Julian Edelman type. So
yeah, and he looks like it too. And then Jacoby Myers, who was asked to do a lot in his rookie year last year. I believe he was also an undrafted free agent, but he just showed a lot more right off the hop than Gunnar Olszewski did. So it is a not ideal situation for any quarterback to be in, whoever it was starting. But I I'm just kind of taking it with a grain of salt right now. This team has a lot of cap space, so we could make a trade. We could sign a free agent that's out there right now. So I don't think that it's time to panic at all. There's still, like, the season literally hasn't started yet. So I think that we should see what we have with the guys that we have. And Gunnar Olszewski's shown a lot this in training camp this year. So the reporters that were on the sidelines watching him just couldn't keep saying enough good things about him. And then Jacoby Myers, he was kind of back and forth, same with N'Keal Harry. So it's going to be a year where we rely a lot on N'Keal Harry, who was a former first-round pick. So with that, it's kind of scary to put a lot of pressure on that guy who didn't do a lot last year. But I heard something, or I saw something on Twitter that was talking about Cam Newton's supporting cast when he went to the Super Bowl in 2015, and it was a bunch of guys very similar in name value that the Patriots have right now. So not too worried yet, but yeah, even our tight ends, they're good, but they're good prospects. They haven't had any meaningful NFL snaps yet, as two of them are rookies. So it's going to be trial by fire for this team for the first little bit.
Oh, that's totally fair. I'm excited to see what Cam does, man. I'm just off the record. Well, on the record, we're recording right now, but just off topic. I really am hoping he does well. And named team captain. Bill's named him starting quarterback, which you all expected, but Bill's been raving about him, like, more than I've ever really heard him rave about Tom Brady, because I think there was a lot of tension there towards the end of Tom's tenure, maybe even dating back to like 2016 or whenever the Garoppolo came into the picture. There was always kind of that, like, did Bill want to move on? There's all these unconfirmed reports, but like just hearing him gush about Cam Newton when many people were like, oh, Bill's going to hate Cam and his swag, and all the stuff and all the antics and how he dresses. But none of that matters, man. Bill just wants to know if you're a good football player and work hard, and the rest of the stuff can be managed. It's not really a big deal. So I'm happy that that's been proven to be true.
Yeah, honestly. And I listened to that sound clip of Bill raving about Cam, and it just got me so amped up, because I was like, there's cohesion here. And I mean, that could be meaningless, but it just, when you hear of dysfunction, then it shows in the play on the field. So hearing that there's that cohesion on the off field, it's getting me a little excited.
Speaking of excitement, Ozzy, games of the week, man. So obviously you can be excited for any game. It's week 1, but with no preseason, this has been an unprecedented offseason leading up to week 1. So we might be in for some sloppy football, but it's football, and it's football I'm happy to watch. So we just kind of went through here for all our listeners and just cherry picked some games that we're especially going to keep our eyes on. And the first one's going to be the Dolphins against the Pats. And I would have been a little more excited for this one if Tua got the nod, but it looks like Ryan Fitzpatrick will be taking the starting reins for now. And against the brand new look Patriots, with obviously the 8 COVID opt-outs and, Cam Newton starting and what we mentioned, Ozzy, I'm just going to hit you point blank. How confident are you that the Patriots are going to take this game 1 against a Dolphins team, which Tua's gotten all the attention on, but they've quietly went about building up the rest of that roster?
Yeah, you say new look Patriots, you could equally say new look Dolphins with all the additions they made this offseason, adding guys like Byron Jones, Kyle Van Noy, Ted Karras at center, things like that. But to answer your question, I'm not confident. I'm kind of going into this year just with no expectations one way or the other. Although my predictions will say otherwise. I'm emotionally, I have no expectations, because it could go really poor or it could go really well. So, but it's the Dolphins, and part of me thinks that, Ryan Fitzpatrick, we've seen enough of him to kind of know who he is. He's a hit and miss kind of guy. And I said it about your Seahawks, Steve, that like with a lot of turnover along the offensive line in the Seahawks case specifically, and not a lot of time to get those reps in, like, yes, you have training camp, but no preseason games to really get that feel. I wonder how long it takes for a team like the Dolphins, who have as many new additions to that roster, to get into that system and to have that cohesion. When I think about Brian Flores, he was on the Patriots coaching staff when, like in 2017, when we got Stephon Gilmore, and there was a bunch of miscommunication, and that's a guy that's been in the league for 4 years. So my point being that Also in Brian Flores' system here, you've got a bunch of new additions. So how long does it take for those guys to get it? And yes, you've got guys like Kyle Van Noy who have been in that system, and maybe that helps. But I'm just kind of curious in general, and I could say this about a lot of teams, that these new additions with not a lot of preseason snaps to kind of get into the rhythm of things, is that going to have an impact? And so for that reason, I would err on the side of being a little more confident or cocky on this week's game. Right. I'm not going to be a coward. I'm going to own it. The Pats are going to freaking win. But with that being said, it's because of those reasons that I mentioned that I think that it's going to take some time for these players to get into the system.
That's fair. I'm going to say, yeah, I agree with you there. And I think it's, is Cam going to come in and throw 4 touchdowns, no picks for 400 yards? I don't think so. But I think if he comes in and can play some pretty efficient football, I'm really curious as how McDaniels is going to use him in that offense. But I'm going to say the Pats will probably take this game by 3 to 5 points. I don't know if it's going to be a runaway. Like I could see like a 24-20 final kind of thing. Fitzpatrick can have those games where it's like, oh, crap, is this guy starting material? We go through the cycle for the last 10 years, but
he has like 5 game stretches every year that he's just on fire.
Absolutely. And then it's like, oh, maybe they should. I guarantee you someone's going to write an article saying maybe they can trade Tua, but we won't go there. But for now, I think the Pats will take this one. But the Dolphins, man, I see in your predictions you have them going 6-10, the Jets finishing worse than them. I have the Dolphins finishing last, but it's a 5-11 record I have them finishing with. I don't think this is going to be a 1 or 2 win team. Like Flores is quietly, like they often criticize moves like the Fitzpatrick trading Minka Fitzpatrick to the Steelers, but they've really done a good job rebuilding this roster from the ground up, and it needed it. They needed a facelift badly. So,
and how short of time they did it too. Brian Flores was the coach literally just last year. They made a plethora of moves, trading guys and getting picks. And they added guys to their system that over the course of last year, we saw them develop into a competent, competitive team that even took down a team like the Eagles, where we think is so like highly competitive and kind of vaunted almost. So like that alone shows how well the Dolphins have been and how well they've added to this team. And so in that sense, like long term, I'm kind of scared. But yeah, you're right. This year, I think it's just too early for them to be at that next level of the rebuild, like the Bills were 2 years ago.
Absolutely. Let's move on to the Colts and Jaguars. Now I'm wondering, people are probably wondering, why the hell do you have this game in here? Colts, leave them out of it. I want to know how bad this Jaguars team is going to be. Like, you know how the Dolphins opened up the year last year, losing 59-10 to like the Ravens, I think it was. I'm wondering if like the Jaguars are going to come out here and struggle to score a field goal, honestly. And this Colts team, Ozzy, which we're going to get to because you have some pretty spicy predictions in regards to this team, led by Phillip Rivers now, a guy who could push the ball downfield, something Jacoby Brissett didn't really like to do. Now you got Jonathan Taylor back there to split the backfield with, oh God, why'd I just forget his name? Marlon Mack. You have a great offensive line. You got DeForest Buckner on the D-line. Like, I don't want to take your points from you for later on, Ozzy, but if the Colts don't win this game, and maybe because of the lack of preseason that won't happen this way, but if the Colts don't win this game by like 2 touchdowns, I'm going to be very surprised because I have zero faith in this Jaguars team. I have them winning 2 games this year. I think this one's a wrap.
Yeah. As much as I love the mustache and the Minshew mania, I'm with you. I can't get too excited about this. I want to be a Minshew homer, and I think that even at best, even if there's some Minshew magic, it's going to be like 10 points or 17 points in a 40-point spread. Like that's kind of the vibe that I'm feeling. Like you said, the 59-10 for the Dolphins last year to start. I'm feeling a very similar thing. So I echo exactly what you're saying.
All right, we won't spend too much more time on that one. Cardinals, 49ers. I mean, I'm just surprised it's such a marquee game to start the season. It's too bad these teams, again, didn't get some more warm-up time with preseason, so we'll see how it goes. But you got Hopkins coming in, going up against Richard Sherman. You have the 49ers who've made a few retoolings on their D-line, getting Kinlaw, obviously trading Buckner, reigning NFC champions. This will be a really telling game if the Cardinals are for real and if those changes made sense. Trading for Hopkins, how involved he gets. I know he's questionable. I'm not sure what he's battling, if it's a hamstring or a hip issue, but I'm really interested to see what kind of offense the Cardinals roll out there now with. You still got Kenyon Drake. Do they run more tight end sets? Last year they started out with a lot of 10 personnel, like 0 tight ends, and they had a lot of receivers on the field. And then Cliff quickly realized that wasn't working and started incorporating more tight end sets. I'm really curious as to what that's all going to look like. So I think the 49ers win this, but I think it's going to be by like maybe 3 points. I think the Cardinals are going to come to play here.
Yeah, this one's probably one of the tougher ones for me to give a take on as to who's going to win. And maybe by the time I've finished discussing my love for the Cardinals, it might change. But I'm very high on the Cardinals this year, and that is why I don't have the Seahawks in the playoff spot this year, which we'll talk about. But the Cardinals, they've made some serious plays, and I've loved the way that they've drafted. Getting Isaiah Simmons this year in the draft after I learned last week or the week before on the air that they had gotten him 8th overall. So like
fond memories.
Yeah, exactly. Adding to Budda Baker in the secondary, and you still got Pat P and that defensive line. Like, I could gush over that whole roster. I just love what they've added, and even on offense with adding DeAndre Hopkins. So it is a very strong team. It's going to be how do those 49ers, how does that defense come back, and can they come back at that and play at that same level? It's not too often that you see a team able to carry that same type of like the Broncos. I guess the no-fly zone was a little bit different, and maybe you could say the same, speak more to for the Legion of Boom, Steve. But I don't know how often it is that a strong defense continues to carry out that year in and year out. I mean, we saw the Jags a couple of years ago in 2017. Look at them now. That's just a prime example. But that defense was pretty strong, and they didn't last very long too. So can the 49ers come back and be strong, that strong defense, that number one defense that they were last year? You're going to need it against a team that's got that strong, high-powered offense like the Cardinals. With all that being said, I think I'm going to lean towards the 49ers here still, because I believe in Jimmy G. Even if the defense doesn't come back strong enough, Jimmy G's having a 35 touchdown type season. I think I made a bet with you in one of our group chats. I'll have to go back. It was like 35 or 40. So Jimmy's coming in strong this year. And
I said he peaked last year, which was at 28 touchdowns. So yeah, maybe we'll see. I mean, as far as your point to longevity of defenses, the Seahawks had the number one scoring defense from 2012 through 2015. But that was a pretty special group. The Jaguars, you can look at as a one-hit wonder. Tomac's going to hate me, but the Broncos, I felt like were kind of a one-year wonder. I don't think TJ Ward really came back the same at safety after that. They were still a pretty strong defense, and if they probably started anyone else other than Trevor Siemian, they probably could have made a wild card push, but they were never that dominant force. You look at some other strong defenses from the decade. That's the main one, really. But even the 49ers
Patriots
defense
of 2014 when they had Revis and Browner.
Yeah.
That was one.
It really depends how it's constructed, but I mean, the 49ers, the way their defense, how dominant it was and how young a lot of those players are, like Bosa and Buckner at the time, and now they replaced him with Kinlaw, who's young but may not be the same kind of impact player. Who was it? Fred Warner, really great linebacker, super underrated. And then you have like the Sherman, the vet, to try to keep things in line back there. Tart is a Jaquaski Tart, I believe his name is.
Yeah.
He's pretty talented back there as well. So I think they're built for longevity, but maybe they, instead of being like a top 2 defense, they're top 5 or 7 kind of thing. But I still think they're a force to be reckoned with. And
even if that's the case, I think that they would be good enough to shut down the Cardinals in this game. Especially with Hopkins kind of battling an injury, like you said. I think I saw that too. There's a hammy or something.
Yes, sir. Bucs Saints. So this is another marquee divisional matchup to start the season. Brady versus Breeze. I was really hard. Obviously, if you remember back to our predictions episode, I was really hard on the Saints, saying they go 9-7 and miss the playoffs. A couple different things have happened within the NFC, not necessarily the Saints in general, that has made me believe that they will now make the playoffs. But I don't know if this is a 13-3 kind of team. I think I see them as a 10-6 or 11-5 kind of team. But I'm really interested to see what Brady, like aside from the Seahawks, who obviously I'll be watching, this might be the game I'm most interested in. Like just seeing Tom Brady in a Buccaneers jersey for the first time. is going to be so weird, so different, so cool. And I'm just really looking forward to seeing how that plays out. That being said, I think it's going to take a little time for this team to kind of get moving, get the gears rolling. I think the Saints win this by a touchdown, if not a little more, maybe 10 points. I think a lot of people are going to overreact. They're going to be saying Brady's washed. They're going to say the Bucs are going 7-9 or 5-11 for all the haters. I'm personally was a Brady hater for a long time. I'm kind of rooting for him in this new situation. I don't think it's fair to overreact to this. I think the Saints win by a touchdown or more, but the Bucs will get things going in a month or so.
Yeah, that's fair. I'm just gonna say it. Like, you know what I was saying about all those additions and no preseason, how it's gonna be tough for a team to mesh. We're gonna forget about that when it comes to the Bucs. I'm going all in on the Bucs until further notice.
Wow. Okay.
I have the Bucs winning this one against the Saints. Don't ask me by how much. I haven't gotten that far yet. I'm just saying Tom Brady is going to be a hit right from the get-go with the Buccaneers, and they are winning every single game until further notice.
Jesus Christ. All right. Well, that no more needs to be said on that one. Browns Ravens. This one was catered more to Zach, who couldn't be on tonight. But are the retooled Browns enough to take on reigning MVP Lamar Jackson? This is a really tough matchup if you're the Cleveland Browns team trying to prove a point coming into 2020, trying to put 2019 behind you and start anew. And Baker probably on his last chance really to be a proven starter, I would say. Maybe Zach was saying maybe he gets one more year after this if it doesn't go well, depending how good or bad this season goes. But I think the Ravens win this one by a touchdown, and it's going to be a kind of a deflating start to this otherwise re-energized Browns team that Zach and we all have kind of felt good about this offseason. But I wouldn't let this game let you write off the Browns for the year, similar to what I'm saying about the Bucs. I think the Ravens, just with how cohesive this team is, they didn't really lose any big pieces, Earl Thomas excluded. But adding Calais Campbell, I think this team is probably set up for success, and they're going to hit the ground running, whereas the Browns are coming in with Stefanski, new system, different things going on. I just see the Ravens winning this one pretty handily. But Browns fans, and Zach, when you do eventually listen to this, don't let that get you down. I think the Browns do have a bright 2020 ahead of them. It's just going to get off to a rough start.
Ooh. How does one come in at this? See, I'm gonna go against you here, Steve, again, because I watched the Browns and a lot transpired between early last year and then this year. But the Browns gave the Ravens fits last year at the beginning of the season, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, you're right. They won that game.
Yeah, and the Ravens ended up losing, if I'm wrong, correct me, but I think they lost their starting center from last year, and Marshall Yanda, their right guard, retired. So they don't have that same offensive line that was keeping Lamar Jackson upright and keeping him at that MVP type level where he was just toasting defenses. The Browns, when everybody's healthy and present and not suspended on that defensive line, you have one of the best in the league. And with that being said, I think that the Browns could take on the Ravens when you think about just that battle in the trenches, because that's where games are won and lost. And that's a good old fashioned NFL saying. But when
if Lamar gets past that first wave of defenders, though, man, it's Malcolm Smith left to make the tackle, bro, and I'm not feeling too confident in him. So.
I know. Yeah, that's fair. I forgot about Lamar Jackson, I guess. But I do really like what the Browns have got going on here. I think that they've got the pieces. They've got the offensive mind and Kevin Stefanski to go toe-to-toe if the Ravens are going to be scoring lots of points. So I'm going to stick by that because I do believe in this Browns defensive front more than anything. And yes, they're a little bit weaker at linebacker, as you kind of mentioned, Malcolm Smith, who's been out of the league for a couple of years, I think, right? Mm-hmm. So it's going to be a little tough ask for them. But Mac Wilson might be back. Hey,
okay, that's big. Then I'm not sure. I haven't looked at what
ever since we brought it up on the pod a couple weeks ago. I haven't kept tabs on that, but nonetheless, Browns are going to win. It's going to be a close game, but at the end of the day, this team has what it takes. Like it's a built roster. It's just dysfunction that's taken this team down.
You bet. Seahawks playing the Falcons. We didn't include it in our games of the week, but quickly toss it in there. I'm kind of nervous for this game. Like you mentioned, the O-line and getting the chance to gel. That could take some time. And Dunbar has been on and off the practice field. Quinton Dunbar, our offseason acquisition at corner. So if Trey Flowers has to go in there and get time and reps against Julio Jones, that could be a problem. I think the Seahawks squeeze this one out. It'll be like I keep saying this with every game, like a 3-4 point game. It may be like a 27-24. Maybe Jason Myers is kicking the last second field goal for Seattle. Maybe my blood pressure is through the roof again, but par for the course for every Seahawks game that took place last year and probably much of the same this year. So I'll quickly add that in there.
That's a good one to add in there. 2 of my non-playoff teams battling it out in week 1.
Anyways,
one of the worst teams in the league for me.
Speaking of predictions here, Ozzy, I know we're probably already pushing an hour here. We don't have a timer in front of us, but as you all know, if you listen through May, June, July, we went through each division and kind of predicted everything. And then sure enough, as that ends, COVID opt-outs come, Seattle trades for Jamal Adams, a bunch of different things happen. And not that we redid them, a lot of our predictions stayed the same, but what we want to do for our preview here is just kind of go division by division, in 2 minutes or less, and just kind of lay out what we each think is going to happen here and what we see the same and what we see differently. So we'll start in the AFC North. Ozzy, you and I both have the Ravens winning that division. I have 13 wins. You have 11. I think we see much of the same happening there. Just a lot of continuity along those lines, and same thing happening. Where we start to differ is I have the Browns going 9-7 and making the playoffs, and you have the Steelers going 10-6. You have the Browns also going 9-7 but missing the playoffs. What do you see in the Steelers team? You're obviously seeing Big Ben stay healthy. I have the Steelers going 8-8.
Yeah, so I looked at how the Steelers handled having Mason Rudolph and Duck Hodges as their quarterbacks last year and still getting, I think, 7 wins, if I remember correctly.
7 or 8, yeah.
7 or 8. That fascinated me because of how low I feel about those 2 guys as your quarterback. Big Ben, he's coming back. Like, there is no ifs, ands, or buts. Even if he comes back and he's a little bit less than what he was 2 years ago, he's still Big Ben. Like, I don't want people to forget about how good he is. He's a top 10 quarterback, top 7, arguably at times. So I think that with that defense, again, a young defense that's always, historically, it's been really tough to play. That is going to be, they've got Juju Smith-Schuster. They've got a good O-line. Those are the recipes to win. Like, I don't know, you get a Big Ben, and I think that we talked about this. What does Big Ben equal in terms of wins? I'm giving them an extra 2 or 3 wins out of it. And that's just all there is to say about it. Big Ben is way better than Mason Rudolph. He's got way better. And so if you agree, you should agree on my pick, Steve. But here you are different.
I have him still going 8-8. It's just tough to see this team, like, Big Ben's coming off like with the equivalent of Tommy John surgery. So I don't know what's left of his arm, and maybe it's wrong to doubt him in that regard. And maybe even Ben with a limp arm is better than whatever they rolled out last year, like you said. I mean, I only have a difference of a win here. The Browns going 9-7, the Steelers going 8-8. They could absolutely easily swap those, and all of a sudden you have the Steelers as the 7th seed. So I'm not writing this whole team off. It's just I think they're due for a little bit, not a facelift. They have Minkah Fitzpatrick. They have pieces on defense. They have Juju Smith-Schuster, Connor, and at running back. I think they still have DeCastro at right guard, and one of the best guards in the league. But I just think they just need a younger quarterback and a good quarterback. I'm not sure how they're going to get there, because if they go 8-8, you're looking at a mid first round pick. So you're not getting Trevor Lawrence out of that. But this team just seems stale to me, and I think it needs a little bit of a refresher. But 8-8, 9-7, either way, you're looking at potentially missing the playoffs. I just don't see this as a playoff team.
Yeah, that's fair. That's a nice stale record for a stale team.
Yeah, stale team. Bengals 5-11 for me. You have 4-12. It's going to be a tough year for Burrow, but they're hitting the reboot button.
No hot takes there.
No hot takes there. AFC South. Ozzy, you have the Colts 11-5, Titans 10-6, Texans 8-8, Jags 4-12. I have the Colts 10-6 in first, Titans 10-6 in second. Colts get the tiebreaker. Texans 7-9, Jaguars 2-14. We're really much in agreement here. You were much higher on the Colts than I am. We'll get to that when we get to our playoff picks. But I really, Brissett I like as like a bridge quarterback, but he takes care of the ball almost to a detriment where he isn't taking enough chances. And I think Rivers is going to come in. I don't know if you're going to see 20 interceptions out of Rivers. I think with the protection he's going to have and the weapons they have, I love the Michael Pittman pick. I love T.Y. Hilton. I still think he has a lot of offer. Jonathan Taylor in the backfield along with Mac. I don't know what's not to like about this team, honestly. They really just loaded up, and I think people are sleeping on them. They are not getting talked about as a AFC heavyweight, and I don't say that lightly because it's a heavyweight.
It's because they've been, I think, to speak to that, I think it's because they've been so good at drafting really good talent, and but nobody knows about these guys really because they're just young. The last 2 drafts they've nailed. Last 3 drafts you could argue they've nailed. So they've got a really young roster, and those guys are making names for themselves right now. This is the year that I think it all comes together, where we start talking about the Colts is like, holy shit, where have we been why haven't we been talking about Rock Ya-Sin? I guess maybe because he was a little bit injured last year, but like, you know what I mean? Just those guys that start to take shape, and Darius Leonard is going to continue to do Darius Leonard things. So
if Andrew Luck doesn't retire, this team's probably in the AFC Championship last year. I don't think that's really a stretch of the imagination. Like Brissett he's not a bad quarterback, but he's not necessarily good. I don't know how to really put him in that category. He's a 71 overall in Madden, and that's probably what he should be if you want to leave it to that. So
exactly.
The Texans, they just paid Watson. I still see them kind of being a middling team. Forgot about the Titans. I don't think they were a flash in the pan. I don't think they're going to come back and take 13 wins or anyone by surprise here. I think 10 wins is a safe assumption. We both have that for them here. Yeah, you have 10 and I have 10. So I think Zach has 10 as well. Yeah. If you guys want a good visual of all these, by the way, they're all on our Instagram and Facebook pages. So go take a look. You could see everything there. A nice visual for you while you're listening. And yeah, I think the Titans, they're going to continue with that formula. If Tannehill continues to take care of the football, Clowney obviously makes that defense that much more dangerous. It's going to be a head-to-head battle with the Colts. I have them both going 10-6, so it could easily be reversed where the Titans are your AFC South champions.
Yeah, I don't think there's much to add there. The Titans are loading up. They continue to do so. Having added Ja'Deveon Clowney, I'm all aboard. I will say about my Texans not making the playoffs, as much as I love Deshaun Watson, I really think highly of a lot of the teams in the AFC this year. Like the Steelers and Browns being ones in the AFC North, the Bills being on the outskirts, and then the AFC West just is a bunch of teams that really could give any team fits. I don't think that the Texans are going to have what it takes offensively. As much as I like Watson, I think that Brandon Cooks and Will Fuller and Randall Cobb, placing your trust in them for 16 games isn't a good strategy, and I don't like it, so I'm not high on them at all, and I have them missing the playoffs.
Totally fair. And the Jaguars, we talked about them. So that's that. AFC East, Ozzy, you have the Bills and the Patriots going 10-6, with the Patriots capturing the division crown once again. Dolphins 6-10, Jets 4-12. I have the Patriots and the Bills going 10-6 both as well. And the Jets 6-10 and the Dolphins 5-11. I think the Jets, let's start from the bottom up. Jets trading Jamal Adams. I just feel bad for Darnold. I don't have any faith in Adam Gase. This is going to be a pretty rough year. I'm looking at this. 6-10s might be generous. I think I just maybe got a little too recency bias with how well they finished last year. And I think they beat the Steelers to knock them out of playoff contention. Like we talked about the Dolphins, I don't think they're going to be putrid, but they're still trending up, but it's going to be another battling year. Curious as to your thoughts on the Bills. We both have them finishing second. Why don't you think this is the year they finally take the crown?
If I'm being honest, I think it's a little bit of bias on my own side. Like once we got Cam Newton, instantly got really excited to the point that I think Cam Newton's a guy, especially seeing those workout videos where he was like pissed off, and you get that Cam Newton where he's going to be coming in trying with something to prove. He's on a very minimal contract. I don't know if it's the vet min, but he's wanting to cash in next year. So he's got a lot to play for this year. With that being said, that's kind of the reason why I have the Pats over the Bills here. The Bills I love. Like if they weren't in my division, I would be cheering for them because they are just one of those teams where they have done things right. They've built the team well through the draft. They've got a really good front office that's making really good moves, whether it's trades like Stephon Diggs or it's signings. I just really like what this team has done. And I could easily see them being like a sneaky team and end up surprising us and going 12-4 this year.
Mm-hmm.
They're just one of those teams that they are built, again, top down. They're one of the better teams in the league. That's just, if you look at it, that's just how it is. And I like I said, it's just bias.
No, that's
I'm
fair.
just gonna end it there.
I like Josh Allen, but I don't love Josh Allen, and I think Bill can still out scheme them defensively and cause problems to where if they end up sweeping the Bills, all of a sudden you lose that head-to-head tiebreaker and the Patriots are taking the crown again. That's pretty much what it came down to for me. I like Josh Allen as like a long-term prospect and potentially becoming a better and better quarterback to where maybe he's a top 15 guy. I don't know if he's that yet even, but right now I just still think he can be outsmarted by coaches like Bill Belichick and it could spell trouble for him. So
yeah.
Let's jump to the AFC West. I have the Chiefs going 12-4. You have the Chiefs going 12-4. We both have the Broncos going 9-7. You're a little higher on the Raiders than I am. They're going 7-9. I have them going 5-11, and the Chargers 5-11. You have the Chargers going 3-13. Ozzy, start with that Chargers prediction, and I don't think much needs to be said about the Chiefs. We could touch on the Raiders and Broncos in a sec.
Yeah. So the Chargers, as much as I said the AFC West is a pesky division, I think that they just are going to take a year to kind of get things right. Their offensive line, yes, that you add Pro Bowl Trey Turner at guard. Yes, that helps. But who do you have at left tackle and right tackle? I'm not quite sure.
Brian Bulaga, but I'm not sure which.
Oh yeah, they just added Brian Bulaga. That's right. So who do you have at left tackle would be my question, and that's one of the most important positions in the league. Yeah, and defensively, yes, I really like what they have, but Derwin James just went down with the season-ending injury. Mm-hmm. Offensively, you've got Keenan Allen and still Hunter Henry. Everybody talks so highly of him, but he just really hasn't proved much for me, as much as everybody wants to talk about how he's one of the better tight ends in the league. He hasn't really shown it, in my opinion. He's been often injured, and when he is on, he's kind of just getting the rust off because he was out with injury. So I think it's going to be a developmental year for Justin Herbert. That's why I have them going 3-13. It's going to be a lot of growing pains there.
That's fair. Noted. I want to note we both don't have the Broncos making the playoffs. We both have them going 9-7. Von Miller being out for any extended time. I made this prediction before that happened. This hurts that much more. I like Drew Lock and I really want to jump on the bandwagon, but I just kind of reflected. I was really high on them. We talked about them as a potential Super Bowl sleeper, a couple months ago, but I just reflected and it's I don't know if I've seen enough of Lock. I think I've kind of I dove into the hype train right away and I didn't really evaluate things. And I think just taking a step back and breathing, I'm all right, I think this team can go 9-7, maybe 10-6, depending if they get Von Miller back on time. But I still think they're maybe just one more year away, another year of development from him away, and then they can make some noise.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm with you there. And I think that once you get a few years of Paxton Lynch, Trevor Siemian, Case Keenum, etc., it's easy to see a guy like Drew Lock who can actually make passes downfield on a little bit more of a consistent basis. And he's young. He's got some moxie to him and just instantly get attached to that hype train. But with that being said, I stand by the 9-7 because I think that this team, they do have a lot of talent on offense, and that's going to keep them in some games. And defensively, you still got Bradley Chubb, so you never know. That could be one really good edge rusher. Could be, it's not two, but it's still better than a lot of teams in the league. So I'll wait to see what this defense does.
Awesome. And the Raiders, we're only 2 wins off. We obviously not a playoff team. Zach has them in the playoffs. I wish he made this episode because I really want to grill him on that. Maybe he has Derek Carr putting up another MVP-like season, but I just don't think this team's there yet. I'm excited for them to be in Vegas. Stadium's beautiful. It seems like there's a really optimistic attitude around them, but I just don't really see this coming together quite yet. But hey, Gruden's under a 10-year deal. He's only going into year 3 of it, so plenty time to right the ship here if they decide to keep him throughout his full term.
Yeah.
Jumping to NFC real quick here. So NFC North, Aussie, you were really high on the Bears, but they just came out and named Mitch Trubisky the starting quarterback. do you still see this Bears team as an 11-5 team? And if not, when's Nick Foles coming into the fold? Give a prediction. What week does he start, Nick Foles?
Week 4.
All right, fair enough.
I just think that they have to, if they've made their bed and now they have to lie in it, it's going to be a very tough sell if you're going to tell the franchise, like, all right, everybody's set on Mitch Trubisky being our quarterback for week 1, and then you switch after he has a poor week 1, and then week 2 you're like, okay, no, we got to go with Nick Foles. It's not going to work out that way. You can't try to sell anybody on that. And if you do, then it just shows dysfunction. I think that the team is probably going to give up on them once they see Trubisky is playing longer than like week 1. Shouldn't have been playing week 1 at all. And the fact that Nick Foles lost the battle is kind of telling on how their season is going to go. So no, I don't have them going 11-5. That was only if Nick Foles won the QB battle and they started him right from the get-go. I could see them being at the bottom of the barrel with the Detroit Lions in that division, 5-11, 4-12. I think that's just where the Bears are going to have to go if they're going to want to try to sell this franchise on a starting quarterback. They're going to need to draft a guy pretty high.
That's fair. We both have the Packers taking a step back. You have them at 10 wins. I have them at 9. Obviously, 10 gets them in the playoffs for years now. The Bears taking a step back. 9 does not for me. I have the Vikings winning that division. A lot of turnover for the Vikings, and this is kind of just going more off gut instinct, but I think a lot of the turnover that happened was necessary. I think, you make a couple trips to the playoffs, NFC Championship, divisional round, and you kind of hit that wall and you need to retool. And I think that's exactly what they did. They're younger. I think they're going to be faster. And I think Cook's on a contract year. You're going to get a great year out of him. So 10 wins. They're not going to be a dominant team. They're one and done in the playoffs, but it's going to be enough to get them into the show. So that's my thoughts on them. And we both have the Lions at 5-11, I believe. Some people are saying you're sleeping on the Lions. I just don't trust that coaching staff, and we talked about that at length.
Yeah, there's really not much to add there. But I do like what you said about the Vikings. Them trading for Ngakoue, I absolutely love that trade.
Yeah.
And I think that, especially with Danielle Hunter possibly out week 1, that just goes to show the depth that they now have. They had Everson Griffin, and now they have Ngakoue. So they've got that added security almost. So, and that's a defense that Mike Zimmer's been coaching for years, and he's always coached up a pretty good defense. So I really like the Vikings here. With the Bears moving down, I would shift up the Vikings. I think that would put them in the playoffs actually with my picks. So
yeah, you have them going 9-7 and the Packers 10-6. So that would, if you have still 2 teams making it from the North, you would have those 2 teams in there. So let's move to the NFC South, Aussie. We both have the Bucs and Saints making the playoffs. As I alluded to, the biggest thing for me was the Eagles no longer being the second team from the NFC East to make the playoffs. I now just have the Cowboys making the playoffs. Therefore, it allows the Saints to make the playoffs. I'm quickly touching on the Eagles so we don't have to do it again. The losses along the O-line scare me. The losses to the receiver corps early on kind of scare me just as far as injuries go. They're going to get off to a slower start, I think. Wentz dragged this team to a 9-7 record. I think he's going to have to drag this team to an 8-8 record, and then that allows the Saints. They actually play head-to-head. I think the Saints take that matchup. I originally had the Eagles winning it. Saints go from 9-7 to 10-6 in the playoffs.
Oh, spicy.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, that Eagles team is just a gong show. I'm so happy I have them at 6-10.
The rest of the NFC South, Falcons 6-10, Panthers 4-12. Opposite for you, Panthers 6-10, Falcons 4-12. It's going to be a trying year for either team. I don't know if we have to go too deep into that one, but you have the Bucs taking the division because you believe Tom Brady is no warm-up period necessary. He's going to get right into it.
Absolutely, 100%. I think that we've seen enough of Tom Brady's competitiveness that he's not going to want to take a game to get into the groove of things. He's already getting mentally prepared. He's getting his team mentally prepared for that first game. Mm-hmm. And not to say that other teams aren't, but like I kind of mentioned, we were talking about a little bit of a slow start for some teams. So I don't think the Bucs are going to be allowed to have that because of who's leading that team. And so I'm confident putting the Bucs there at the top.
Awesome. Let's jump to the NFC East. I feel the same way with the Bucs. I think eventually they're going to get things rolling. I just see them getting off to a slower start, but eventually they'll take things. I have the Cowboys taking the division at 11-5. I was kind of sleeping on the Cowboys till recently until I was just seeing like going through the roster. And it's like, wow, they really have a top 5 roster on paper. And Mike McCarthy, as much as I didn't agree with a lot of his in-game decisions, I found in a lot of cases he was too conservative. But I think Jason Garrett, like, you want to talk about stale, 10 years. I couldn't even believe he was there for 10 years. Like, it just didn't feel like it was that long. But anyways, deep roster, Dak on a contract year, which whether you like Dak or not, these guys are, typically ball out in their contract years. Mike McCarthy coming in. I just fail to see how this team doesn't win the division, barring any kind of catastrophic mental lapse. And you see the same thing, Ozzy. You have them going 10-6. The biggest one I wanted you to touch on was your Washington football team going 8-8. I have them going 3-13. I love Haskins, but I think they're in for a rough year.
Yeah, I think I'm being a little bit extra biased just because I believe in the Hask King. But I also really like Coach Ron Rivera. And this could be another situation where we see like the Dolphins last year. They get the right pieces in place, the right coach, et cetera. And then they just retool and start planning for next year. That could be exactly what we see out of the football team. But the football team out of Washington. But with that being said, I do really like the pieces that they have. I've mentioned their defense on multiple podcast episodes. They've got a lot of strong pieces on that team, offensive line and defensive line. Again, very important if you want to win football games. So I'm kind of going aboard the wagon because of those reasons, and Hask King, of course. They're kind of lacking talent in skill positions, but with that being said, I think that they can squeak out some ugly games, grind it out a little bit. We don't even know what they have at running back right now. Bryce Love and Antonio Gibson, those are some raw talents. And so we'll see, maybe they turn out to be hits and we see them take out a couple wins.
Also, J.D. McKissick, former Seahawk and also former Detroit Lion, great receiving back. And if Rivera has any say on offense, they might want to use him in that McCaffrey role, getting him out into some cool option plays. So keep an eye out for him as well. I'm not sure what the capabilities as receivers those other running backs are, but I know as a pass catcher, McKissick's second to none as like a third down back. He's quite good. So
he's so fast.
He is. Giants, I just don't see much out of. I think they're still a ways off, and I just don't believe. I think Joe Judge is going to be a one and done coach. I just don't see. I think he pissed off a lot of people with his run with the team thing, and if that keeps up throughout the full year, I think they're going to tune them out by week 8, and it's going to be a rough year for them.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Awesome. NFC West, Aussie, this is where we differ the most, and I know we're probably pushing an hour and a half here, and we're going to go to our Super Bowl predictions right after this. I have the Seahawks going 13-3. I had them going 11-5 or 12-4 in our original NFC West predictions. The Jamal Adams trade is huge for me. I think last year we came into the year having our starting safeties being Tedrick Thompson and Bradley McDougald. And now we have Jamal Adams and Quandre Diggs, hopefully Quinton Dunbar, and then Shaquille Griffin at the corners, whereas before we had Trey Flowers and Shaquille Griffin. We have great linebacker depth with our draft pick, Jordan Brooks. God, I think I had that right. And, KJ Wright and Bobby Wagner still playing at a high level. The pass rush worries me. I'm not going to lie, and a lot's going to hinge on that. But you look on the offense, Russell Wilson, DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, Greg Olsen, a healthy Will Dissly, and on paper, a better offensive line than what we had last year. Again, like you mentioned, the gelling process as it takes to get those communications right. But 13-3 might be ambitious. You want to talk about bias. I think Russell Wilson wins MVP, by the way, for another hot take. Finally, he will win MVP this year. But I'm still not sleeping on the 49ers. If whoever wins this division, the next team behind them is going to be one win less, in my opinion. I have the Cardinals making the playoffs at 9-7. And I know we're rushing through this for our listeners. You can find all this on our social media pages, and then you can come yell at us in the comments section. I upgraded my prediction on the LA Rams a bit. I had them at 5-11 or 6-10 like you guys. I went to 8-8. I don't want to sleep on this team and all of a sudden McVay pulls some voodoo out of his head and they just end up beating a bunch of teams. So I'm kind of bracing myself that this team might actually still be competitive and good. So 8-8 seems like a fair record for them. Your thoughts on the NFC West?
Have you been watching Hard Knocks?
I haven't actually. I know we talked about it, but I haven't found the time to do that yet. So
I thought that's why you might have switched your picks more than anything, because you start to fall in love with McVay and Goff. But
fair enough.
Yeah, no, I think you mentioned I've got the 49ers taking this one at 12-4, and then the Cardinals also making the playoffs and finishing in second at 10-6. So yes, your Seahawks do miss out, Steve, but when you look at your division alone, it's a very pesky division, even with the Rams going 5-11. The NFC West seems, and maybe it's just because I focus on that one when it comes to, I just think of how teams split their interdivision games.
Yeah.
Seems like the NFC West has has more splits per year, like between teams than any other division. So like, for the listeners, just for clarity, I guess, like a split being the Seahawks will win a game and then the 49ers will win a game. So then they split the division season series. Yeah. So I just think that's where you're going to get 3 losses right there and then. And then the NFC is a gauntlet. We've already talked about that. There's some really good teams here. And so I don't think that it's a matter of the Seahawks being bad per se. I just don't think that. I think that coupled with their offensive line getting into a mode where they can gel, because I think you've got 4 new offensive linemen, or at least 3.
Right tackle, right guard, and center. So 3. Yeah.
3 new people that are coming in there and have to take on that gauntlet of a division on the defensive line. You're going up against Aaron Donald, Nick Bosa, and Chandler Jones.
Oh yeah, you already mentioned it. Yeah,
all those guys, and those are just in your division. So that's going to be a tough ask for your offensive line, and so with that and the slow start, I think that it's going to be something where you guys just end up 9 is just capped easy. But the Cardinals, again, I just believe in that offense so much. It's going to be so fun to watch. And the 49ers, they're going back to the Super Bowl.
Great. Love to hear that. All right, Ozzy, time for our Super Bowl predictions here. So for me, I have the Seahawks getting the number 1 seed in the conference, defeating the San Francisco 49ers in the divisional round, and then defeating the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the conference championship before meeting the Kansas City Chiefs, where Russell Wilson will not only add to his MVP regular season, but also get Super Bowl MVP as the Seahawks top the Chiefs. Is it biased? I don't know. I'm wearing a Seahawks Russell Wilson jersey right now, but I will say I think the Seahawks are a playoff team. I know, Ozzy, you might disagree, but other surprise things happening for me in the playoffs. The Cowboys make the divisional round. I think they beat the Cardinals in the wild card round. I have the 49ers, they win their game against the Vikings in the wild card round, get to the divisional round, lose to Seattle. And other than that, it's pretty typical. I have the Chiefs and the Ravens meeting in the AFC Championship game. I think it's kind of par for the course standard, maybe kind of 2 simple predictions, but I know, Ozzy, your playoff predictions differ a little bit. You have a dark horse making a Super Bowl run.
Yeah, I do. I've spoke about how high I am on the Colts, and I kind of stood by that when I made these predictions. Like you said, it's simple picks to go with the Ravens and the Chiefs because they're just the highest. Last year, they're the highest powered, and they're the most unstoppable, it seemed at times. But I look at the teams around them and the Colts in particular, and I look at the rosters and just how they could compete with those type of offenses. And it's close. These are close games that are going to be fought. It's not like the Colts are going to come in and just bash a team like the Ravens or the Chiefs, or vice versa. If you were to have it that way, like I think the AFC is quite tight when you talk about like the Ravens, Chiefs, Colts. You could even throw in the Steelers or the Bills or the Titans. Sorry. So it's going to be a tough battle, but the Colts, you had mentioned some of their pieces on that roster, and I'm just going to go through them again. You add Jonathan Taylor to Marlon Mack, Phillip Rivers, and replace his Jacoby Brissett and others. And then you've got your Michael Pittman, who you draft, T.Y. Hilton, of course. Paris Campbell last year is now entering his second year. He's going to be he's kind of like a gadget guy who you would love to have on your team. And Zach Pascal at times last year looked like a stud. and he just kind of came in and replaced T.Y. Hilton when he was down and out. So, like, just to show that you've got that kind of depth on the offense, you've got a top 3 offensive line, and then you add DeForest Buckner to a defensive line that has Justin Houston and then Rocky Sin in the back in the secondary at corner.
Who's that linebacker they have? I keep forgetting his
Darius
name.
Leonard.
Darius
Leonard,
yes.
Here you got. I really like that they went and signed Xavier Rhodes this year. So he was a little bit hit and miss in the Viking system, and so there's nothing to say that he's going to come out and be a stud in Indianapolis. But that depth, like, speaks for itself. You get a guy like Xavier Rhodes who at times can be a starting number 1 corner, and maybe a change of scenery is good for a guy. He's 27 years old. Let's see what he's got. Kenny Moore came in and did some really nice things last year. So, and that's not even mentioning Malik Hooker in the backfield, one of the top safeties in the league. So I just mentioned a couple of guys, and for the listeners, that might just sound like a bunch of mumbo jumbo, but this team has been drafted so well, and it's been put together so well. I really like what they've got going on. I don't think that Phillip Rivers needs to come in and do a whole lot of great magic to go on and win these games. Like I said, they're going to be hard-fought games, but I've witnessed with the Patriots many years that you can win close games and still go on to do well. And it's not like, oh, Patrick Mahomes is you can't beat him. No, Patrick Mahomes is not going to go win the next 10 Super Bowls just because he signed a 10-year contract. Like, that's not how this works. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Although fair. You might have it, Steve, because you just.
I have been winning 3 this decade. That's it.
Yeah. Fair enough.
And Russell Wilson wins the other 3.
Lamar Jackson and the Ravens, I think that is going to be. I think the Titans laid out perfectly how you're supposed to beat them, and I think that the Colts are simply equipped enough to do it with Jonathan Taylor and Marlon Mack. So.
So who do you have them meeting in the Super Bowl? You kind of alluded to it earlier.
I've got them facing the 49ers.
And who is winning that game, Ozzy?
I've got the 49ers taking it.
Damn it. We're going to send them all that way. At least let the Colts win, man. Come on.
Exactly.
Oh.
Yeah, as much as I like that team, I think that warranted that much breakdown just because people are going to see that, you don't have the Ravens or the Chiefs in the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
What?
And for those wondering.
You guys sound that way.
No, we took it personally. Zach has some interesting teams making the playoffs. The Texans and the Raiders, for one. The Packers, maybe not so surprising to maybe just if you're just kind of observing it, but I would be surprised if this team makes the playoffs. If they do it, it might be with 9 or 10 wins. And he has the Chiefs meeting the Saints, and I believe he has the Saints winning the Super Bowl, the whole thing. So I'm much lower on the Saints than he is, and maybe even you are, Ozzy, but to recap, I have the Seahawks over the Chiefs. Zach has the Saints over the Chiefs, and Ozzy has the Niners over the Colts. You can find all this on our social media pages, and we'd love to hear yours. Give us your Super Bowl predictions. Comment on our Super Bowl prediction post, and let us know what you think. And lock those predictions in there before kickoff Thursday, because after that, we just hop on the roller coaster and we enjoy the ride. So I can't wait for this whole season to go. It's been a long off season, just with everything that's went on with the CFL being canceled, the coronavirus. I mean, everything that's just 2020 in general has been an absolute mind fuck, if I put it nicely. It'll be nice to have some football and a sense of normalcy. We still shouldn't ignore the other issues that remain out there, but it's just nice to have football back. I'll just put it as simple as that without rambling on for another 20 minutes here. So, Ozzy, any thoughts? And if not, where can people find you on social media?
I think I've given the fine folks enough things to ponder, especially the Colts are probably still baffled at that pick. But
they haven't listened to the thing I said the last 10 minutes. They're just still like, the fucking Colts. Hey, that's what they're thinking.
Exactly. Yeah, they probably turned us off and deleted it.
Yeah. We hope not. But
yeah, exactly. Yeah. We are not fake news, I promise. But yeah, fine folks, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at AustinPaul_. That's Austin with a Y, not an I.
Not an I.
I'd appreciate if you do disagree with my picks, reach out to me. Let's hash it out on a nice Twitter beef or even just DM. Yeah, I'm open.
Twitter beef. It doesn't have to be beef. It could just be a civil discussion.
I've had some nice ones on my IG DMs, just some nice banter. So we can do that too.
Yeah. You find me on Twitter at SteveBullen22 and on Instagram at SteveBullen_. Be sure to check out all the amateur agency socials. That's where you're going to find our predictions. And a quick reminder, starting next week, we're going to be recording Tuesdays, meaning our episodes will be live Wednesdays. So if you're used to getting those bad boys Thursday, Fridays, or listening to them on the weekend, get them a little earlier because we want to do like we did with our games of the week, give some predictions, recap the week before, and have some fun watching football. So we're fired up, and we hope you are too. And we'll see you here next week for episode 79. Good night and Godspeed.